Okay, here's number 3 on page 153. The problem is take the derivative of the cosine of the square root of 3x, and u is the square root of 3x. I want to talk about this problem a little bit because there's a problem with the way it's set up in the book. If you look at the problem, if you look at it carefully, you'll see that when they write the cosine of the square root of 3x, the square root sign is only over the 3. The x is not part of the square root. But then over here when they give you u, they say use the square root of 3x, the square root of 3x. X is inside the square root. Well, that's different. So we need to understand what the problem would be here. If we said that f is the cosine of x and g is the square root of 3x, then f of g would be cosine of the square root of 3x with the x inside the square root, which is not the way they've got it written in the problem. So the book made a mistake here. It's hard to know, of course, then, which one they want. Do they want this to not be inside the square root? Or do they want this x up here in the problem, do they want that one to be inside? So let's pretend for a second that they want the problem to be that. U should be the square root of 3x, where the x is inside the square root, and we're taking the cosine of that square root. Then f prime the derivative of cosine, negative sine, and g prime is the derivative of the square root of 3x with the x inside the square root. But our problem is, let's think about our rules. We know how to do x squared or x to the negative 2, but do we know how to take the derivative of a square root? Not yet. So we don't know how to deal with this. This is a problem that we wouldn't be able to solve at this point in our calculus career, although it's coming really soon. Very soon you'll know how to do that, but not yet. So we can't solve it if this right here is u. So let's change the problem to what they wanted. Remember, up here they never had x inside the square root. Let's take it back out, and let's change u so that it's the square root of 3 times x, not the square root of 3x, but the square root of 3, and then that number times x. Alright, well, so that's going to change some stuff down here. There we go. Now, if f is the cosine of x and g is the square root of 3 times x, then f of g gives us this, where x is not inside the square root. So, f is cosine, f prime is negative sine. G is the square root of 3 times x. G prime is the square root of 3 times the derivative of x. So that's the square root of 3 times 1, which is just the square root of 3. That one we can do, because it's just a constant number times x. We can take the derivative of that. So then our derivative should be f prime of g, negative sine of the square root of 3 times x, times g prime, which is the square root of 3. So if we put the number out front like an amplitude on our sinusoidal function here, negative square root of 3 times the sine of the square root of 3 x. So I apologize for not catching that typo in the book before I assigned the problem. If you didn't do number 3, I don't blame you one darn bit. But there's how it goes.